And welcome back in to another episode of the Unblocked podcast. I'm Keith here with Brian and Coach. We're going to get into it today. We're lucky to be here at Lucky Irish Pub. Thank you for hosting us. Come by, see all the girls. It's Wednesday. It's Fireball Shot Day. Get it? We're going to run through a couple quick things. Our special guest today is going to be Mike Gottfried. We're going to talk a lot about what he does in the community. Brian's going to fill us in on that as well. Then we're going to get into a couple NFL scores and a couple other controversies going around the league at the moment. So, Coach Brian, why don't we bring on Mike? And guys, go ahead, have at it.
Coach Gottfried, Fred Riley here. I'm doing wonderful. It's good to visit with you. It's an honor to visit with you. You know, when you start talking about the Gottfrieds and the Gottfried legacy and all of y'all have meant to all the places that you've been, it's hard to decide where to start. But can you tell me a little bit about your growing up, your background, which obviously sheds light on the amount of time you spent trying to help young people?
Well, it was a real small town where Joe and Johnny and myself grew up in Crestline House, 5,000 people. And interesting thing, and we would be all be a part of sports. And we lived around the Harbaughs. And Gates Brown lived in the town that became a player for the Detroit Tigers. A lot of these guys went on into coaching because of one man. And his name was Merle Hudson. Merle Hudson he was older now and he wasn't coaching, but he had won state tournaments and really was respected in the town. And he had a summer program where we would go play baseball at the Big South Side. We broke the city up in areas, and the Big South Side would play from 10 o'clock to 11:30, and then the Little South Side would play in their game.
That's great.
And then everybody would go swimming. And he knew him as coach. They always referred to him as coach. One of the first time when I was the head coach for the first time, a kid yelled at me on my team. He said, "Coach." And I never even looked. I was the only coach I knew was Coach Hudson. And I'm a poor substitute for Coach Gottfried. He was a great man. You know, a lot of these people went into coaching because of him teaching, and we had a lot of successful people come out of Crestline because of that one man and a lot of other.
Yes, sir. Now you mentioned growing up with the Harbaughs. I mean, my family, the Riley family, grew up with the Underwoods, P.W. Underwood, and that family. Oh yeah. In Cordova, Alabama, and that stretch of road, and so PW, I got to meet him one time, and he talked about how they used to fight. All my dad and his brothers would fight the Underwoods, and he told me one time, said, "I probably whipped your dad's butt one time." And so did y'all in the Harbaughs fight? Did y'all have any goings on like that?
PW was a great coach. And no, we didn't fight much. I think we were just hoping somebody would come with a baseball or a football. We didn't cause a lot of trouble. And I can honestly say I know Jack Harbaugh was very tough, and he got fights. He won 2 fights out at Kelly Park where after baseball game one time. But I actually kind of agree with everybody. Let's go our own way.
Yeah, but as competitive as all y'all were, you knew at some point in time somebody had to fight over whether he was out or safe, or whether that was a charge or a foul. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast.
Mike is
The oldest guy and the biggest guy had the choice of one. The referee.
That's great.
Mike. I've got one question, and I tell people often, with Coach DePietro passing away and Jerry Harbaugh passing away, we grew up like Sandlot, and I think people they literally don't get what the movie Sandlot has been instrumental from Crestline, Ohio, and literally it was Sandlot, and we can get Joe on here next week whenever his schedule works out, and he can tell about the guy that was tied up through his dad. Do you remember that story?
Yes, he was a very integral part of our team, because we needed one guy for baseball, one guy for kick the bucket, and his dad would come home. He was a railroad, and he'd time up. So we would have to send some. Joe DePietro went in the window and untied him, and we got the game going, and we got him back and tied him up before his dad came home.
What an awesome story! Now, obviously, we all know about your coaching career and team focus, but we all sort of get to a place in time where it's not about achievement, but about legacy. And tell me, what, from your perspective, what you feel like the Gottfried legacy is.
Well, I don't know if we have a legacy. I guess I would say that Coach Hudson was a big effect on all our lives.
Right.
We wanted to be like him. We wanted to be revered as a coach by the team, not
right.
just the fans or anybody else, but the team. And I saw some things in Coach Hudson and other people that were teachers or pastors in the town that you liked, and we watched Fred, we watched Coach Hudson, we watched him, and learned from him. And he would open the door for his wife. He'd carry the sacks of groceries. He was a polite man. You didn't want him to get off. He was tough.
Well, I can tell you, Coach,
when they said, we're not cussing, we're not
right.
We're just doing what he wants to do.
Well, it's funny that the question was to ask you about your legacy, but what you basically covered was his legacy. His legacy being all of the kids that came through there and the impact that he had on the world. And that's a wonderful way to answer the question. And I will say this, yes, the Gottfrieds have a legacy. And I'm very proud to say that I've known y'all and had an opportunity to spend time with you. And y'all have impacted the world, and you've impacted my life. And I thank you very much for that, sir. I really appreciate that. Yes, sir.
Very nice. I knew it.
And Mike, can you just tell us a little about team focus, and we can go over Grandpa Fritz dying, and if you can just kind of tell us that story. And I know it's emotional for you, and it's emotional for me as well, and the impact that had on your life.
Yeah, we were doing great in 1955. I couldn't have been any happier playing ball and going to school and having friends and people. And one thing about Crestline, 5,000 people, if you got in trouble, everybody knew it. They'd go to mom and go to dad. So it was a close unity in that town. And that night when Joe went with Dad to play bowling, and I stayed home, and then he came home, and I was awake, and so we got with him and talked to him, like we did every night when he was in town. He was a river engineer, so he had to go on runs to Pennsylvania, and so Joe remembers some things, and I remember some things, but that's about 3:30 in the morning. My dad said, I'm not feeling well, and he walked to the bathroom, and he collapsed on his back, and so we all went running. And Mom said, Joe, go get the doctor. He lived 5 doors down from us. And she said, Mike, put a washcloth on his head, go water. And Johnny just stood, and way he was looking at him, he didn't know what to do. And they came probably an hour later and took him away and said he had died.
And
You know,
And, so we got together. And we never talked about it. And one day in Mobile, we were out sitting and talking, the three of us, and we started talking about it. And because we just buried it, because we said, how can this happen? But we had to move. We had to move in with different people. I went in Harbaugh for 3 months, 4 months. It was tough. And because they didn't have enough room for their family too. And Joe and Johnny went to my grandmother's house, and my mom went with the aunt. So we all got together back then. And we made the new house, rented that. So we just never talked much about it.
you know that, and what I mean, a heartfelt story, and I mean, it brings, my dad was from that same generation era that you're from, and his daddy died when he was 6 years old, and they I mean, all the kids got given away and scattered, and lived through that same thing, and and I've heard all those stories my whole life about, and it's a reminder of how blessed we are that of the other people that came into his life that allowed me to do the things that I was able to do, because people that impacted him, and coaches and teachers that impacted him, or I certainly wouldn't be on a podcast talking to Mike Gottfried. And that village raised him, and just like yours did. Yes, sir.
That's a good word.
but the positive thing actually came out of it, Mike, with how you develop team focus. And for I know the plans I have for you, and I tell my daughters that all the time, Maddie and Harper, and we're all Ravens fans with Marcy, and we root for Michigan as well. And can you tell us a little bit about how team focus, the idea started with you and Mickey?
Mickey started, and she had a word that we were supposed to take some boys out to eat, and she asked me about it. I said, no. And with everybody else's boys and coaching, I'm not going to do that. I'm with my girls. She asked me a week later, and we started team focus, and it was 40 guys in the first year. 23 years old now. And we had 40 guys in that first group, and 30 of them we still talk to today. So was working in there. We walk with him in life, because I tell him, Jeremiah 29:11 for you, but I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. Plans to prosper you. Now I'm sitting there, and my dad dies, and I'm thinking, well, how's that going to prosper? And prosper.
I still remember you bringing a big old tight end body out to Davidson in 2001 when I was a defensive coordinator, and I think you got ill because you felt like Vic had him in the wrong position. He had moved into offensive tackle or something. and he was a big old young'un though. But oh shoot!
Well, we honestly appreciate everything you've done for the community and for Mobile, starting the bowl. I mean, you've been an unbelievable mentor, friend, uncle, everything. And even whenever my dad died, and we can briefly talk about my dad, because when he died, everybody came up to me, you, and Joe at the funeral, and I think we compared notes a couple months afterwards. Everybody said, I like you, Brian. I like you, Mike. I like you, Joe. But your dad was my favorite. And Jim Harbaugh and John Harbaugh have both told me that within the last 6 months. So
Johnny was the best. Joe's, I had
yeah. And Joe actually has the best response whenever anybody says, Johnny was my favorite. Joe's always like, he was my favorite too. So, and I remember all those meetings and whiteboards that we did for South Alabama starting football. I came down to Mobile in '95, and Lisa came before me, but like literally we made Mobile home. And I think you've made a big impact on Mobile, because I can't go anywhere where anybody says thank you. And that's a pretty awesome legacy that you've left. And I think Coach talked about your legacy, and it's both coaching and the team focus. And I think team focus is where God wanted you to be. And
Mobile was great for me and my family.
And you've been great for Mobile, no question. No question. Coach, thank you so much for giving us this time. And it is an honor. And again, just whether it's people within your close circle that you've impacted, or when you get to heaven, you realize all the lives you've impacted of people you never met. And they'll come up to you and say, and hug your neck.
And Mike, literally, we were here at Lucky's Irish Pub on Airport Boulevard, and a guy that's cooking here came up to Coach Riley and hugged him.
And it comes.
I'm back here. All right. We're moving on then. That's pretty emotional.
Hey,
Yeah.
that'll get the tears flowing for me, talking about my dad, my uncles, who've been my heroes for my whole entire life. And unfortunately, Joe had a prior commitment. He couldn't come, but we're going to get him and Ronnie Arrow on in the next couple weeks to preview basketball.
All right, good deal. So, all right, well, we'll go in. Moving on, we'll talk about a little NFL opening weekend we had just happened. Going back to Thursday night, where the defending Super Bowl champions, Kansas City Chiefs, decided they were going to host the Detroit Lions. Now, the Lions came in. It was an incredibly competitive game. And, a lot's been said about their new mentality. Detroit has been kind of the bucket that's getting kicked around so frequently in the NFL these days. And even after a slow start last year, their new coach, Dan Campbell, just refused to let it go and kept saying this team is going to come together. Now, rolled off a bunch of wins at the end, beat the Packers, kept them out of the playoffs, and they opened this season.
And that's good for you, Keith, as a Chicago Bears fan, right?
The evil man in Green Bay is gone, and we can, all move on from there. However, there's a new man whose his stepbrother just showed up, and it's not looking good. But that's a whole nother topic. But the main thing is this new mentality, Detroit Lions. Saints. Coach, you've been there. You've been in that locker room. When you get a coach, even with a team like Detroit, and you get a coach in there who's motivated and connects with the players and just drives those players, how much of a difference does that really make?
Every place has its right fit. Has the right fit for that particular culture. Detroit, working class, tough. The fans are certainly going to respond to that. The fans are going to respond to that kind of energy. And then over time, you bring in the kind of guys that have that same mentality, that are blue collar, get after it, bloody your nose football players, and then you build upon that. I mean, and what he does there, might not work in New Orleans, or might not work in with the Chargers or with the Chiefs, but he's perfect for Detroit and that Midwest tough football mentality. And he is who he is. There's nothing phony about him. You can fool him for a little while. You can fool players for just a little bit, but over time they watch you. Everything that you do, just like Coach Gottfried, what do you talk about? His youth league baseball coach, that he watched everything he did, opening doors for his wife, carrying the groceries for his wife. You think those guys don't watch everything that guy does and everything he says? And when they realize you're genuine, tell you what, it's a pretty good formula. You start, winning together, and then you lose together. And going through losing is the tough thing. Is that okay? Oh, how are you going to respond to that? You come back the next week, which you touched on last year. They were losing, but they never quit believing, because the guy was the same from day one all the way to week 17. And he's perfect. He's perfect for the Lions.
I think, honestly, he would have been a great coach for the Saints when Sean Payton left, to be honest with you. And I'm not judging the coach of the Saints now, but Dan Campbell, he's kind of Detroit Lions. It's kind of becoming America's team. And like Keith, you and I both do Twitter a lot. So I think Dan Campbell, it's like his coach says, it's genuine. It's real. And
people really rallied when the Hard Knocks on the HBO series came out. People rallied behind him and said, all right, this guy's interesting. I like what he's bringing.
And it's refreshing. It's like Mike McDaniels down in Miami. It's different than the typical coach that says, oh, yeah, the team's ready. We're going to do this or we're going to do that.
And I don't know if you flip the two with Miami and Detroit if they would be successful.
Absolutely.
There's no guarantee that they would be. I mean, they are the right fit with the right places, and they're putting the pieces together of guys that buy into what they're selling and what they do.
And at the right time, Coach.
Sure, timing is everything.
The timing is everything in life.
Look, I went to Lenore City High School in 1990, and 91, my first high school coaching job, and we had a 6'2", 218-pound running back named Travis Cozart, who ran a 4.45. And Travis Cozart is still the all-time leading rusher. I handed that ball to the big dog for 2 years and won the only district championship that school has won since then. If he hadn't have been there, I don't know how many games we'd have won. I mean, Travis was the real deal. So timing is everything.
Fantastic. And then moving on, a little more local to our area, the NFC South. Falcons, Saints, Bucks all win. Bucks go to Minnesota and pull out the win on the road. Minnesota tested their luck all last year with close games, and Tampa Bay, winning there. They're hosting the Bears next weekend. Let's see what they keep doing. The Saints took care of business. Derek Carr did his job. There was a close game. Tennessee put up a bit of a fight. Saints made the comeback, took the win home. But the bigger story around the league, there are a lot of blowouts to begin the season. You got the Browns 24-3 over the Bengals. Cowboys go on the road to New York 40-0 on Sunday Night Football. And then the 49ers, Brock Purdy goes into Pittsburgh 30-7. Is this opening week jitters, or what do we got going on here?
I literally will talk to Coach here, and I'm going to ask him a serious question. The NFL is probably a bigger, I guess, connection with me because I've had relatives that coach there. But, Coach, some matchups are bad.
Sure.
So, like the NFL, and then we can carry this over to the preseason.
Mhm.
But some matchups just don't work out.
Right.
And
I agree.
obviously Joe Burrow is the best quarterback in the NFL, in my opinion. So, but somehow they crap the bed every time they play Cleveland. And I don't know. I don't know if Kevin Stefanski has a kryptonite.
Right.
I'm asking you as a coach, like,
You know, I mean, this, and my knowledge of the NFL is the biggest thing that always jumps out at me is the league is designed for everybody to go 500, and you're going to, and they want everybody to go 8-8 if they can. So that way the fan bases are still active and still alive at the end of the season. The more teams that have a chance to make the playoffs, the more money you make, and the more interest there is in the league. And you're going to end up through that 8-8 running into somebody that you just struggle with.
they're just better than you.
You just can't.
They're better prepared.
And whether it's their roster at that time through injuries or again in the NFL today, at the left tackle can't block the defensive end, and you're not going to keep a tight end or a running back in to chip him. Then you're going to have a long night.
That's a great point, Coach. I think we will see in my lifetime, in Keith's lifetime, in your lifetime, the defensive ends and the edge rushers will get paid like quarterbacks. It's a matter of time before it happens.
No question. I mean, they're difference makers, and because of the nature of the game today, and what they've turned it into. Again, and then of course they do everything they can. It's still all about protecting the quarterback, keeping the quarterback healthy, and and because that's the marquee guy, and the teams with the best. Jay Pope, who coached for me for years at Davidson, said, "Coach, the team with the best quarterback usually wins," and he's. It's usually the case. Over time, it sort of plays out. That guy's going to be the difference maker. And so what do? You get a guy on his blind side and harass him as much as you can.
And you try to chip him. You try to chip him with the fullback or the tight end.
The tight end.
Just slow him up a little bit.
Running backs hate doing it. And,
running backs do the old
they don't like it. Tight ends are a little more effective. And
you can't affect the game if you're not standing up.
Or they figure out, the other you slide your protection to that defensive end all the time to give a little help. But now you're short a man over here, and they know you're short a man over here because where you're sliding their protection, and so it's a chess match. No question.
The Bosa's literally impact the NFL on a weekly basis. But there was a guy from Houston Texans that got in Lamar's face the whole entire game. I think he's from Georgia. Keith may know the guy's name, but either way, he messed up Todd Monken's plan for Baltimore against Houston, and luckily we survived that one. But
and a plug. I mean, I didn't get to see that game, but Jimmy Ward is a team captain for the Houston Texans. Played for me at Davidson. And
I think
one outstanding football.
I think D'Amico Ryans will turn it around at Houston. He's still with a rookie quarterback, but at some point he's just too good of a defensive coach to not be.
I think he's the right fit there.
Yeah,
he's going back to what we said earlier.
He's right. He's brought in guys that are his guys, and Jimmy came with him from San Francisco, and that's it. It takes a little time, but he'll get it done.
Perfect. And then we mentioned you brought up Cleveland and Cincinnati. Does Cleveland and Cincinnati? Joe Burrow missed all of the preseason. He had that injury early on, but you see a lot of other teams that are going through things where you got a lot of players who think they're the man. They sit out preseason games. You get it's a very divisive topic where are you playing your starters? Are you resting your starters? Are you worried about them getting hurt? Tommy Waddle in Chicago always says, if you're scared, get a dog.
Or if you want to be happy, sell ice cream. I'll throw that at
Rodgers. Didn't do much in the preseason. Came out, fluke injury, pops his Achilles. But you look at a lot of these players. We saw a lot of guys sucking air because they didn't do enough in the preseason. Then they put pads on and they're on the field. Coach, what's rest versus preparation?
Sure.
Where does it all come
and it's pretty
play?
cool that you touched on the sucking air thing, because the young man who came in and visited with me before the show that works here, that played for me, talked about your teams were never going to cramp. We were going to run.
Yeah.
We were going to work. We were never going to go out there and look tired and be bent over in the season because of the things that we put in the off season. I just don't think there's nowhere to hide in that. I mean, you've got to work to be an effective football player. You've got to practice. I mean, I don't care. I mean, how good you are. I mean, you have got to put in the time. You've got to put in the work. And if you don't, it shows up at the end of the day. I mean, it's a results business. I mean, get it done. You know, like I said, if you're scared, say scared. I mean, you have to play the game. I mean, you've got to be as a wide out, go over the middle and catch the ball. Period. And you know,
Another Tommy Waddle.
Take a shot.
You know, I mean, you've got. I mean, there's so much to playing football, and football is a physical game. Football is a violent game. They do everything they can to take that element out of it in the preseason because they don't want to get people hurt. But then result is usually offenses really stink early because it is easier to build defense that way than it is to build offense that way. And so you get offensive stink. The offenses stink. Don't put up points. Turn the ball over because all of a sudden it's one thing to 7-on-7 rhythm and timing. It's another thing to 7-on-7 with somebody in your grill and you know, in real world and guys in your feet and throwing off your back foot.
Mike Tyson has the best quote on that. He says, "It's all fun and games until somebody hits you in the mouth."
Well, no question. And,
Absolutely.
It's so I mean, if I ever made mistakes in terms of coaching, it was overworking them and over preparing them, and then backing off a little as the season went there. But I was never going to go out there and say, "Gosh Almighty, what have y'all been doing all summer?"
Yeah.
I mean, I paid in my world. I paid $10 to see this. I mean,
Exactly. You saw players. You know, I was going to go back to my Chicago Bears. Nate Davis comes in. He keeps saying, he's like, I'll be ready. He says personal issues, just not on the field today. And all through training camp, preseason games, 3 plays in, he, like I said, second arrow. It's, are you just not in football shape? I mean, it's almost embarrassing, but at the same time, there's those guys who are those dudes.
Sure.
They can come in and just pick right up where they left off. But how do they prepare when they're not?
They're and those guys are few and far between.
You know, I was talking with some guys, and I said, it's like, you know, I had like one professor in college who always said, as long as you make an A on the final, I'll give you an A.
Mm-hmm.
And then it sits in the back of your mind like, oh, well, I can just pay attention. I'll just worry about that last week before the test and go in and do it. And next thing you know, you're like, oh, hell, I got a C now because I got a D on the final and I had a B, but, you know, because you think I can just run in there and get an A real quick and get my into class.
You know, and you brought up boxing. I mean, you remember going back in the day when you'd have when I really followed boxing, you got the heavyweight champion of the championship of the world, and the guy comes out and takes his robe off and has gained 30 pounds, and you're like, what has this guy been doing for the last 6 months? You know, and gets waylaid. You know, I mean, don't last 3 rounds by some young guy, some, you know, Buster Douglas or somebody, you know, and because he didn't put in the time. He's been, you know,
I don't know if it was Deontay Wilder or someone a couple years back. They did their big entry to the ring, and it was a championship match. And he came out and had this big old suit on, you know, like Terminator style.
Right.
And it was all for it was really cool looking, but the thing ended up weighing 30 pounds. Yeah. And he had to walk out the gate in a football stadium all the way to the center there, carrying all that. And he said, look, like that, I didn't practice that.
Right.
I'm just walking up wearing a robe. I wore that up there, and I get up there, I'm like, oh, man, this kind of, you know, you're starting to breathe a little heavier way before
from your intro.
So it's just kind of, again, you got to be prepared for what's coming at
That's
you.
right.
Fantastic. And we'll move right along. Another big topic in the NFL this week. 2 big injuries. Also, the same injury. You got J.K. Dobbins on the Ravens popping his Achilles, and Aaron Rodgers, 4 plays into the season, pops his as well. The NFLPA has made a very large push about their biggest complaint from players is about grass surfaces, not the turf.
Well,
Coach Brian, what do you guys think?
I'll go first, Coach, because everybody from the players that I talk to, and I talk to a lot of players in the NFL that have played over the last 5 to 10 years. So they love the grass until inclement weather happens. And when it's a complicated issue,
Chicago.
Keith. It's a complicated issue, Keith, because you've got so many different fields and you've got so many different owners that like do whatever they do. And a perfect example is Jed York when he opened up the new stadium in San Francisco. He took the cheap route, and literally everybody's slipping all over the field. Everybody's slipping on the practice field, and they decided to go back to Candlestick to practice. Literally, like he built this $30-40 million, and at some point the injuries happen. But so it's not a issue that you can solve like within, okay, we're going to put grass in every field, because Chicago, Baltimore, like in January is a lot different than Chicago or Baltimore in,
especially when Chicago hosts the city championships in high school. So it's
absolutely,
You know,
so
and
so
there's always
that's
something.
the thing. The grass is great when the weather is perfect, but anybody will tell you, and I ran my fastest time at Ohio State camp with John Cooper on natural turf or the artificial turf. So the thing is, like, there's not one size fits all. And I think J.J. Watt and Pat McAfee talked about it a little bit on their podcast on ESPN today. But I don't think there's like NFLPA or anybody can decide, okay, this works here or this works here. And supposedly there's some robot, and the robot actually tests the surface before the games. So I don't know a solution. But
You know, the worst enemy for all players is the ground. More people get hurt hitting the ground than they do anything else. More concussions come from hitting the ground. Injuries come from getting a natural grass, getting your cleats stuck in the ground and cutting, and you blow your ACL. I mean, the reality is that nobody ever envisioned players being this big,
and
this
strong,
fast,
and
this strong.
Yeah.
And truthfully, their bodies weren't designed to be that way. I mean, they weren't. You know, the knee is made to do like this. It ain't made to do this. And then they have ACL surgeries, and then they bring them back too quick and get them hurt again, because they got to get them back on the field. They got to make plays, a certain number of plays to make to get their bonuses, whatever it is. And you know, as we said earlier, it's a violent game. With you, I mean, you could play on grass, you could play on turf, you can play in the sand. I mean, people are going to get hurt. It is the nature of the beast, and as he said, there's no grand answer for that. I think that's why practices a lot of times they stay off the ground, because the ground, again, you get hurt on the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, didn't know if Tua was ever going to figure out how to be tackled. How to land. You can't always land with the back of your head hitting the ground. I mean, learning how to fall as a quarterback is an art, to know how to protect yourself as you're going down and not land on your shoulder or land on your collarbone.
And Jay Cutler from the Bears, who we're going to try and get on, and Joe Flacco were the worst sliding quarterbacks that I've ever known in the NFL. So,
and it's hard to practice how to fall if you don't ever get tackled.
Beautiful. All right, that sums up our NFL scoreboard review. Off the field issues, though, we've been kind of following in the college football. Michigan State, Mel Tucker has had his current case going on. He has released a statement. He will be fighting it, and in my opinion, kind of things like these, I'm just. You want to listen, you want to pay attention. I don't want to pass judgment on anybody till all the facts are laid out. It's early in this. But Brian, you said you got a couple topics on this.
The thing is, Coach and I did a podcast that we're going to release, I think, this weekend with Danielle and Dan Lust. And they, from a lawyer's perspective, they probably covered it better than Coach and I could. And I actually made a mistake whenever I said it was he said, she said. Mel Tucker actually is admitting to whatever the transparency that happened. And I think everybody knows. And I don't think we need to go in and dig that up. And as I said, Keith, today, whenever we talked on the phone, was I feel sorry for his family. I really do.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that lose in this whole deal. And I've been part of coaches getting fired and coaches getting hired, and it's all well and great until somebody embarrasses you.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's what's happening for Mel Tucker. And I've met Brenda Tracy, and I think she's a great person, and she's a great advocate for women's issues with the NCAA. And I just don't want to dig into the topic. Coach can kind of tell what.
I tell you what Dan said. The most intriguing thing Dan said was the fact that he has admitted that there was some type of relationship.
Yep.
Which he says is consensual.
And he says it's consensual. The question is, within the contract, is there an embarrassment clause in the contract? Not when you talk about firing somebody for cause. Is it in there that you do anything that embarrasses the school, embarrasses the university, embarrasses this program? And we don't know how his contract was written. He said some folks have that in their contracts that he works with. So we don't know.
So
all the details of that.
It's
because what happens is he's embarrassed Michigan State, and they're trying to figure out how to deal with it.
I've signed 3 of those contracts as a professional medical device salesperson. If I go on a Twitter rant or a Facebook rant, like literally whatever company I work for, they can cut ties with me tomorrow.
Yeah. But so it comes down to, there's the legal issue, and then there's the moral issue.
Right.
The legal issue is what's going to be interesting to follow. The moral issue, I think we can all kind of see where that's going. And Brian, as you so well put it, there's families involved.
Right, sure.
So, there's no need to sit back. We'll just kind of see how that plays out. Let the courts do their thing. Let the attorneys do their thing. And we'll just kind of stay abreast of the situation. But another thing that dropped yesterday, Jim Trotter drops a lawsuit against the NFL. For those of you who did not follow that situation months ago, back at the end of March, Jim Trotter's contract with the NFL Network was not renewed. He came out saying that it was not renewed based on the fact that he had been challenging Roger Goodell on racial inequalities throughout the league. And the NFL, of course, has denied all of this and then releases a statement specifically quoting 2 coaches in the NFL and saying racist remarks. That is going to be a very interesting case to follow. Again, you hear rumblings of this frequently, but guys, any opinion on that, or follow the breadcrumbs to see where it goes?
I think Jim Trotter has an axe to grind. Obviously, Keith and I talked about this today via text, and I don't want to get into too many legal opinions of. I think we're kind of going with a positive podcast, and that's okay. And Jim Trotter, what he said, if it's true, Keith, I literally will come on and do a podcast for an hour telling that guy's the biggest piece of crap in the world. But I think we need to hold off until it goes through the process. And the Mel Tucker thing is bad enough, and we're trying to be about coach, football, family, and faith.
Sure, and again, in that case, I mean, they go through discovery.
Yep.
I've been through multi-million-dollar lawsuit. Guess what? They're gonna get every text you've sent, every email you've sent, any communication you've done for 20 years. And if it's true, they'll find it. And if it's not, they'll find that out too. And it ain't nowhere to hide when all that stuff comes through.
I think our friend Dan Luss said last night, we'll present the facts. And that's what we're trying to do, Keith and Coach, with this podcast is we'll present the facts. And if you can go on one side or the other.
That's your call.
Yeah. There's a morality standing there, but you look at here's what happened, here's what it is. But we'll just stand by on that. Well, guys, we'll kind of start wrapping this up. Looking forward, we'll be back on Friday. Looking forward to the weekend with NFL preview, college football preview.
College football games stink this week. But next week, we actually have good college football games.
It'll be – I don't think we're going to need to discuss too much going into this weekend. There might be 1 or 2 games looking at it that would be of note, but And I'm just going to go ahead and drop this in here. Is that a couple of the major things happening in the sports, especially the sports entertainment world, is that for the first time in 40 years, Vince McMahon will no longer be the head of WWE. He has sold his majority share to the same company that runs UFC, but he is still involved. So I know people out there still follow it. It's quite entertaining, but we'll see how the storylines go and everything there. And for any NBA fans out there, today made official the Board of Governors has approved the new policies on load management on players, stating that two or more all-star caliber players per team cannot sit out the same game, and they have defined.
I think that's a good thing for the fans.
It's a great thing for the fans. You might not be the biggest NBA fan, but if the Lakers come to New Orleans and you can get a ticket and you want to say, you know what, I want to take my kids to go see LeBron, and then you got everybody sitting out because maybe the Pels aren't that great. But at the same time, they said they define a star player as someone who is made an all-star team or made an all-NBA team within the last 3 years.
I think that's huge for me and my daughters. If we go over to New Orleans and we see Anthony Davis or LeBron play,
it's great for everybody.
We spend $100 before we even park.
Yeah.
So, and that's in the nosebleeds.
Yeah, and then people are always trying to go to live events, and it's just something good. It helps. That's a big complaint. It's we're all a bit older. We all watched the NBA games from the 80s and 90s. We saw what was that and what is different now. But the game progresses, and hopefully this will be a good thing going forward and give the fans something entertaining. Agreed. Especially if you're going to sit down and tune in, you're put your time into that. So, all right, guys. Well, we want to thank everyone for joining us for this edition of the Unblocked podcast. I'm Keith here with Brian and Coach. And for that, we're going to sign off and have a great night. We'll be back with you on Friday.